There is no bigger testament to the power of being a mentor than the story of Eugene Sandow. His legacy, sealed in the form of bodybuilding's highest award, was a direct result of the tutelage he received from performer and innovator Louis Attila, who himself was a student of the first renowned strongman, Italian performer Felice Napoli. Born in 1820, Napoli was a trapeze artist who incorporated gymnastic feats and singing into his show, alongside demonstrations of strength, which included firing a cannon off of his shoulder and lifting a horse while upside down. Variety of skill is going to be a theme here. Louis Attila, otherwise known as Professor Attila, followed in Napoli's footsteps and became even more influential, using his fame to be the first celebrity trainer to the royals and eventually spreading his influence to New York in 1893. Professor Attila was born in 1844, stood at 5'4" and 175 pounds, and was said to be capable of performing a 200-pound or 90-kilo bent press. Maybe take a grain of salt with the numbers that predate standardized equipment. Attila is credited with inventing that movement along with the Roman chair and the human bridge, otherwise known as the Tomb of Hercules. Attila's inventions, along with his New York gym that hosted J.P. Morgan, composer John Philip Sousa, and boxer James Corbett, made his influence unquestionable, something he knew and freely asserted. $1,000 to any charity if I cannot conclusively prove that every alleged instructor of physical culture in this country is either a former pupil of mine or using one of the systems I have originated and perfected. That was Attila in 1894. Before expanding into the West, Attila hosted in his gym in Brussels a young Friedrich Mueller, who came to be known by Eugene Sandow, born in 1867, who Attila taught and eventually took on tour alongside the magician Bertrand. That's right, strongman feats and magic tricks. It was a good time to be alive. These early performers were true to the spirit of vaudeville, where pageantry and showmanship reigned. It was the driving force of strength culture's popularity, and something that modern strongman culture would do well to preserve. As a 20-year competitor myself, I often wonder what modern strongman would be if it embraced the showmanship of its roots instead of sliding into a sanitized, standardized version of the sport. But that isn't quite a popular opinion, and it's one for a different video. Now we can start to glean insight into the training methods of this era by evaluating A, the writings they sold to the masses, and B, their role as strength performers. Works like Sandow's light dumbbell system, inspired by Attila's 5-pound dumbbell system, promoted very light arm exercises with 5-pound weights, done for blistering high reps of 50 to 100. The secret, they claimed, was in dynamic tension, that is, squeezing the hell out of the weights with every other muscle while doing the movement. This was, of course, the first example of clever marketing taking precedent over solid training advice. The programs were certainly difficult if done correctly, and likely resulting in some changes in strength and physique if adhered to religiously. But the prescription had exponentially more to do with making training appeal to the masses. 5-pound weights could convince a consumer more easily to jump on board, and they were easier to manufacture and sell than the full run of equipment and training needed for a full-time strongman. Sandow did rationalize this as a beginner routine that emphasized the importance of mind-muscle connection as an important first step before heavy lifting, and described the work as being plenty for the average person. So while many make the mistake of romanticizing his light dumbbell systems as some lost key of strength, forums can be found today with eager followers still putting the system to the test, the reality is that these systems were created around the logistical limitations of the day and sold to the lowest common denominator. They simply do not provide improved conditioning, size, strength, or even basic preparation compared to modern bodybuilding routines. The strongman of the Victorian era's real secret sauce came from the practice with heavy weights in preparation for their performances. With both bodyweight exercises and fixed strongman implements alike, scaling the exercises is not done easily. Bodyweight exercises and implements like fixed barbells, dumbbells, stones, sandbags, steel you might bend, or horses you might lift while upside down, usually come in 3 varieties: light, manageable, and challenge. While skill work with manageable weights is vital, many performers will find themselves spending each session exerting great effort with challenge weights, which are definitionally too damn heavy. In Sandow's book, Strength and How to Obtain It, under qualified instructors, heavy weightlifting may be pursued without the risk of danger. There are many other more specific directions, but they depend so much on individual requirements that it is not wise to put the rules on paper. A calisthenic athlete might take numerous failed attempts at a muscle-up, just as a young strongman might spend an entire session attempting to lap and load the heavy sandbag that is almost there. Given the number of skills to be mastered and the performance schedule demanded of these performers, there is no doubt that these too heavy challenge sessions would be all too frequent. So there's no way around it. The training of this era was grounded in frequent heavy practice repetitions with low reps, heavy weight, and a ton of effort. Now, the turn in physical culture that focused on aesthetics over performance came in 1893 when promoter Florence Ziegfeld displayed Sandow at the World's Columbian Expo in Chicago, only to find the audience was more astonished by his sinewy, muscular build than the weights Sandow was lifting, which prompted the incorporation of poses alongside his lifting in further shows. The fascination continued as Sandow gained fame. He was shown here in 1894 in a short film series from Thomas Edison Studios. In 1901, Sandow hosted the very first official bodybuilding contest in London. This wasn't just a niche novelty, but an event that attracted the attention of society as a whole. This first show was judged by Sir Charles Laws, an athlete and sculptor with 12 pieces featured in the Royal Academy of Arts, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote a few little-known pieces like The Lost World and Sherlock Holmes. So with the first physique contest, Sandow ushered in the Bronze Age of bodybuilding and secured his title as the founder of this movement. Now, while the creation of bodybuilding put a new focus on physique and influenced physical culture into a new direction, those changes didn't exist in a vacuum. Far from pure specialization, the training of Bronze Age figures still involved immense overlap with other sports and were influenced substantially by strongman, gymnastics, and what would eventually become Olympic-style weightlifting. Guys, if I can help fund this channel and help you solve a problem, I call that a win-win. So please allow me one moment to preach the good word of Boostcamp. I tend to get a little complex when I'm writing workout plans. Tracking progress for these programs is hugely important, but options were never great. I would write these long, complex progressions by hand into a notebook, or I would carry a binder filled with spreadsheets I printed off of LiftVault. That's why I'm here to introduce you to Boostcamp. Boostcamp is the easy way to track training progress directly from your phone. Their library of programs features countless dozens of powerlifting and hypertrophy-specific programs from your favorite creators, including Jeffrey Verity Schofield, Johnny Candido, Eric Helms, Greg Nuckols, Alberto Nunez, and of course, yours truly. Boostcamp also has exclusive programs that you just won't find anywhere else. Select the one best suited to your needs and watch the sets, reps, weights, and exercises populate automatically. Don't guess at that one weight you lifted that one time for how many reps again? Have your log of training with you at all times for easy reference in the convenience of your phone. Not only does Boostcamp have a stellar product, but their support is the only reason this channel exists. So thank you, the viewer, and thank you to Boostcamp. Check it out today. The link is in the description. So as we move into the Bronze Age of lifting, on the one end of the spectrum were muscular physiques that rejected the need for heavy weights. Charles Atlas is one of the most recognizable figures here, with the advertisements of his muscle-building system still resonating in the minds of every skinny weakling hoping to never get sand kicked in his face again. He promoted the dynamic tension system that involved squeezing and flexing the muscles through a range of motion as the hands pressed against each other without any equipment or resistance. If this smacks of Joel Seedman, it should. Atlas was a student of Bronze-era strongman Earl Lederman, and his physique was thusly built with weights. So like Sandow and Attila, bypassing the need for heavy equipment made it possible to sell a system that appealed to more people and required little overhead. It was the primitive version of buy my template. You would just think that a push-up or a lunge would have been present. Now, a more legitimate case against heavy weights was Polish performer Bobby Pandor, who at 160 pounds, or a little over 70 kilos, and 5'6", presented an astonishing physique that was born out of light dumbbells and gymnastics. It was claimed that he actually refused to lift heavy weights, except for his legs, where he would sprint stairs with his brother on his back. While lean and sinewy, Bobby was, of course, of slight muscular build, not as big as some of his other contemporaries. It should come as no surprise that he was overshadowed by the likes of George Hackenschmidt and Hermann Goerner, who, along with many others, were staunch proponents of heavy weightlifting. George Hackenschmidt was an Estonian wrestler and strongman born in 1878, about a decade younger than Sandow, and he impacted physical culture, sporting one of the biggest physiques of the era at 5'9" and 220 pounds, or 100 kilos. He created the bench press and the hack squat lift variation. Prolific writer and mail order guru Earl Lederman wrote in his 1924 book, Muscle Building, Hackenschmidt was a rare exception in muscular development and strength. And I want to make it clear that no matter how diligently a person may work, there is not one athlete in 10,000 who could ever acquire Hackenschmidt's proportions and strength. So where we spend so much time discussing today unrealistic standards that get pushed by steroid users, as if we should only present standards or physiques that are attainable by the lowest common denominator, It was known over 100 years ago that results vary, and the best of the best are simply made of something different. George himself was an incredibly well-rounded man, speaking 7 languages, penning books on philosophy, and training as a cyclist and a gymnast in addition to a wrestler. From How to Live in 1908, it may be suggested that there is no reason why a man should go to the trouble and exertion of struggling with heavy weights, since there is no crying necessity for that particular man to acquire any phenomenal degree of strength. To that, I would reply by asking why a man should desire to be weak. He was endowed by his creator with muscles and sinews, which would enable him to cope successfully with such physical feats as he might be faced with during his earthly career. Today's field could do with more men cut from this cloth. Hackenschmidt's books outline the same wisdom that frustrates novices and natty lifters today: hard work, sleep, and nutrition. His training prescriptions gave what he thought were the most effective exercises, early compound barbell movements, along with ideal repetition ranges. As he said, some trainers recommend to their pupils for the training of all muscle groups one and the same light weights and believe they are able to obtain the same effect by frequent repetitions. My experience has taught me that this is wrong. For example, it is quite impossible to improve strong muscle groups, as for instance the hip muscles, with lightweight exercises. Earl Lederman mirrored this sentiment, saying, "I have often observed different individuals exercising in gymnasiums and wondered, while watching them perform light freehand movement, what physical goal they had set for themselves. Light calisthenic work has never developed huge muscles and never will. In order to succeed in exercising, the student must perform progressive work. I do not mean increasing the number of rep motions, I mean that the resistance you are working against must be made heavier as your muscles increase in strength. I'm a firm believer in performing exercises that tire the muscles within 10 repetitions." Hackenschmidt's most valuable insight was into his method for finding appropriate weight and increasing it over time. He encouraged lifters to find a 10 repetition max in each lift and start with 5 reps. Every week they were to increase 1 rep up to 10 reps and then repeat by adding 5 to 10 pounds and starting again at 5 reps. This was one of the earliest written descriptions of double progression, a method that, to many young lifters eager to get a handle on their training today, still seems cutting edge. Hackenschmidt recommended another method for explosive athletic movements like the 1 and 2 arm variations of snatches, cleans, jerks, and presses, where the reps needed to be lower. He encouraged doing 3 reps with a 10 rep max, adding a few pounds for 2, and then adding a few more pounds for 1 repetition to establish a record. As he said, it is quite sufficient to try records every 3 or 4 weeks, and in the meantime practice thoroughly exercises of endurance, and with light weights, try to still improve those muscles which you have found to be somewhat flabby. It is easy to find out at what point one is lacking. So way back in 1908, at the dawn of the Bronze Era, the importance of skill work, heavy weights over light weights, weak point isolation, and appropriately paced progressive overload was not just known by the greats, but featured front and center in their publications. Any discussion of George Hackenschmidt leads directly to the other Bronze Era giant, Hermann Goerner. Born in 1891, Goerner became a strongman in the 1920s after losing an eye in World War I. At 6'1" and weighing in the high 200-pound range, or over 120 kilos, with relatively low body fat, he represented a shift forward from the lean, grainy, sinewy types that came before him. Goerner's lifts are legendary today, in no small part to the loss of context over the years that has led to them being embellished. His only recognized deadlift record officially is a 2-hand variation of 652, though he's often credited as having lifted over 800 pounds, but in an unspecified style. It's speculated that the unofficial weights that got around 800 pounds were done in a partial style, like this 1-hand block deadlift variation. Regardless, his strength was renowned across the world, and he stood as one of the biggest men of the era, all before steroids existed. As a weightlifter and performer, his workouts were focused entirely on compound skill movements. Historian Terry Todd recounted a discussion with Charles Smith, who documented a week's workout from Goerner. He would train 5 days per week, a mix of cleans, snatches, deadlifts, presses, and curls, both 1- and 2-hand variations, in a range of 1 to 5 reps. The protocol for each exercise was usually taking 6 to 10 sets to work up close to a limit before moving on to the next exercise. The lifters of the day had caught on to the consensus that big movements done for a lot of practice, progressed forward in weight, was the ticket to maximizing your size and physique, but experimentation was just beginning. Sigmund Klein was another innovator of the Bronze Era. In his New York City gym named Klein Studio Physical Culture, opened in 1929, the gym's tagline was, Here We Make Men, and it was in these gyms that he pushed his Klein system. Sig preserved the focus on improving movement patterns over body parts and valued variety and athleticism. He combined heavy barbell movements with body weight and isolation exercises, often in long circuits, and in one example, deemed one of his favorites, he performed 23 different exercises in direct sequence, ranging from dumbbell and barbell movements to body weight and abdominal exercises. Most all were done for 10 to 15 reps without repeating exercises and without stopping.